I'm Josh Light with PoliticIt.com here in Albany, New York with Chris Edes. He's a Libertarian candidate running for U.S. Senate. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, Chris, tell us the big differences between you and your competitors in this race.
Well, I have a number of competitors. The first is the incumbent, Kirsten Gillibrand. She's the Democrat. She subscribes basically to the democratic philosophy that the government needs to make rules and regulations and, needs to tax its citizens and use them for various programs. And of course, there's always more good causes than we can fund, which is really the major failure of that philosophy, in my opinion. Wendy Long is the Republican. Many people might think that she shares a lot of libertarian values. I mean, she is pro-gun and wants to keep the taxes down, but I would say the major difference is the Federal Reserve. I have not seen anything from her in terms of understanding the role that the central bank has played in causing our economic problems and perpetuating our economic problems. And I would say, I am fully committed to an audit of the Federal Reserve and eventually a transition to a commodity-backed currency. The Green Party candidate, Kalia Clark, is, like most Green Party candidates, tends to favor increased role of government, which I, as a libertarian, do not. And I actually don't know much about John Mangeli, who is the fifth candidate in the race. He seems to have his heart in the right place, but I don't really see that much of a plan.
So, Chris, tell us how your experience has prepared you for the U.S. Senate.
Well, in terms of things like holding prior office, I really don't have a lot of experience. My major experience is more of like an intellectual or policy perspective. I really try to stay plugged in to world events and what's happening in our economy. And I think that I have a perspective. It tends to be a libertarian perspective, the Austrian economic perspective, that's not shared by any of the other candidates. And I think that's a major qualification that I bring.
Chris, when you're out in New York, you're talking to a lot of people. What fiscal issues are people in New York concerned about?
Well, jobs is the big deal. I mean, everyone wants a job. They want it to be a good paying job. They want it to be a full-time job. A lot of them look to the government for help, which I think is the wrong direction, because every job that the government creates, it creates using wealth that is taken from the private sector, and you end up having things like, a single job ending up costing like $1.1 million to create, and that just doesn't make any sense at all.
And you're concerned about the debt. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we're in is, right now, we're in a situation where we're basically paying off the Visa with a MasterCard. I mean, debt is spiraling out of control. Like, in the last 4 years, like, the amount of debt that we have incurred exceeds the amount of debt that we have incurred, in our entire nation's history prior to that. And it exceeds it by a lot. If you or I kept paying off the Visa with a MasterCard, our credit cards would be canceled. And eventually other countries like China are going to figure out that we don't intend to pay this stuff back. And that the only option that leaves is for the Federal Reserve to buy U.S. Treasury bonds, which is just printing money, which makes each dollar worth proportionately less as there are more dollars, which is not a solution at all. And you end up having a situation like in Zimbabwe, where they actually started putting expiration dates on their dollar bills in anticipation of when they would be worthless. And I'm trying to avoid that.
Chris, you're a big advocate of civil liberties. Do you feel like the government has infringed upon the civil liberties of Americans?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this latest National Defense Authorization Act, which basically allows the military to just, come and grab you and put you in a prison indefinitely, like without charging you with a specific crime, I and many Americans find that disturbing, and it's disturbing that a federal judge struck down the 2012 law, the authorization for 2012, which they passed last year, and then they passed an authorization for 2013 this year with the exact same language. So it's like Congress is not even getting the message, and it's a problem. I think that I'm not sure exactly why it is. I think that the government doesn't trust the people, and that's what it, when the people fear the government, there's tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is freedom. And so I think we need to elect people who have a philosophy of saying, we would rather have the power ourselves and the decision-making ability ourselves. And, we have, in this country, we are founded on English common law, which is that you're innocent until proven guilty, and you have a right to privacy and a right to the security of your possessions. And I feel that that is something that's not being respected.
Do you think the government's been respecting the Constitution lately?
No. No, it has not been, and not just for the reasons that I put forth. In terms of going to war with Iraq, Congress delegated its ability to declare war to the president. I think that was a big mistake. The president was wrong. We didn't find weapons of mass destruction. The whole thing just sort of blew up in our faces. In addition to that, I mean, Congress routinely delegates regulatory power to agencies like the EPA, and then that gets pushed down the chain to some minor bureaucrat who has civil service protections and can't be fired. And that person can actually override the decisions of elected state legislatures. For instance, the EPA recently decided that any puddles that form on your property from rain are national waterways, and they can therefore regulate your land. And that is the kind of thing that is just outrageous. And, the supremacy clause of the Constitution has been interpreted to mean that, states can't do anything about that. They are unable to even regulate their own waterways. I mean, I think it's in Colorado where basically the water that falls on your land isn't your property, it belongs to some other state, and that uses the Interstate Commerce Clause. And I mean, these sort of things I think have been interpreted expansively, and really they should not have been. And, we need legislation that sort of clarifies that, and also in my role in confirming Supreme Court justices, I would encourage the judiciary to adopt a stricter interpretation.
Now, Chris, when we looked online, we looked at your IT score, your online presence. What are you doing to improve your IT score, your online presence?
Well, I have a Facebook page. I have a Twitter account. I have a website where people can sign up for email alerts. I work with computers for a living, so I like to think have a talent for that. But honestly, I mean, there's so much social media out there. I've wondered about this myself. I mean, there's something like 100 or 200 social media sites. And I really think that there's an opportunity out there for someone to put together a business plan or a model to manage all of this stuff. But at the present time, Facebook and Twitter and a website is about as much as I can handle on a third-party budget.
How's your campaign going right now?
It's going pretty well. I mean, our primary focus is door-to-door. I mean, we do have the things that I just mentioned, but, we are outspent by a ridiculous amount. I mean, the incumbent, Kirsten Gillibrand, has $13 million in her campaign account. I think I have about $500 right now, although I'm hoping more donations roll in the next 30 days for a final push. But basically, the money that we're spending is for me to travel around and to show people how to do door-to-door campaigning. You asked about qualifications. I have run in many local offices, 4 many local offices, and that is, the grassroots strategy, when it's done right, is better than the big money strategy. But you have to go and you knock on doors and identify people who are sympathetic, call them before Election Day, offer them a ride to the polls. I mean, get your people to the polls is basically my strategy.
Chris, where can people go to learn more about you?
Well, my website is www.vote-for-chris.net, which is a good source of information. And that will direct you to my Facebook and Twitter accounts if you are so inclined.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.